Look what came in the mail today. If you get the controller only without the motor, this is how it is packaged. And looks like we have USB receiver type cable for the computer. I'm not even sure what that actually goes to. And the Sur-Ron cable. And then we have our KO controller. Alright, so we're going to start by removing the bash guard. And I actually have the Unicycle upgraded bash guard, so because I smashed the other one in on some rock. So we're not actually going to remove the full bash guard. We're just going to let it drop down. Then we can remove that cover, that plastic cover that's on there. Now remember, I'm only replacing the controller. I'm not doing the motor. I don't have the motor. I need you guys to remind me to tighten these back up when I'm done, huh? Alright, so the Luna bash guard does not let you rotate it. So looks like we are taking this all the way off. I was looking at their Discord channel today, and it looks like some people have got some new mappings for the stock battery that's not bypassed and having good success. Let's hope that's our ticket. We're going to switch to the smaller Allen wrench, and we're going to get this plastic cover off of here. Yeah, see under here we got Phillips. We're going to set those screws right by the other Allen nut so that we know that it goes to this cover. Before we go crazy, you guys are supposed to remind me to do some smart stuff like take the battery out, dumbass, and turn your breaker off, etc. You guys really dropped the ball on that one. Breakers off. So we are going to have to remove the screws that are holding this. This is going to have to come forward so that we can get to the wires to tuck it in. We're going to grab the bigger Allen wrench again. Now that was loose. It was not even that tight. Take a minute again to remind everybody, including myself, to go over all these bolts after a few months of riding. That one was tighter, but not tight as I would expect it. And we got these 4 right there. This little plastic guard here slides off, and now you're exposed to the actual mounting holes, which are back there. Hard to see, and even harder to get a solid key on it. Alright, so I'm going to move this forward a little bit, pulling this breaker and everything forward. We're going to try to rustle some of these wires out, but we're going to probably need some finagling to get them back in there too. So we're going to go ahead and unplug all these. They can only fit one way, so should be easy enough. Maybe. Maybe not. One down. 2 down. 3 down. Did not hear the click on this one, but let's try reseating it. Pull it out. This one does not like to fit perfectly. This is definitely a pain. Let's look in there and make sure those all look lined up. This one is not pushing in all the way. As you can see, pushing it in caused 2 pins to actually push out, and wiggling didn't work. So I had to reseat these wires a number of times to get it to work.
One day later.
Welcome back, guys. So I had to stop that video midway through this controller install, and first I'm going to apologize for the fact that I have to do this video today, and apparently my neighbor has 2 of his like 8-year-old kids or 4-year-old kids mowing the lawn, and they don't know what they're doing. They just like do 2 feet, stop, run, stop. It's been going on for 30 minutes and I've tried to wait. I don't have time to wait though, so we're gonna talk a little bit about the snag I ran into. So yesterday I was working on this controller and I got it all taken apart and the old controller unplugged, and I decided I would try to hook up the wiring harness for the KO controller before I got it installed. Like, I kind of thought that it would be a good idea if I could just get these wires tucked back up in here and everything else nice and tidy before the controller was there. It would be good. It was a good idea because what happened was I was pushing in these connections for this wiring harness for the KO, and I got to this one. This one is the medium square looking one, and I couldn't get it to push in. And so I didn't want to ruin it. I was pushing pretty hard. You know, I looked down in the controller or the cable and checked that the pins looked straight, because, you know I'm an IT guy. I understand this, but they looked fine. They looked all straight to me. The thing I did notice is that this white plug was a lot more difficult and snug to fit into this black housing than this black one. This one just slides right in. This one I had to wiggle and squeeze just to get inside the perimeter before even the wires were touching. Once I got to where the wires were, I was pushing and it had resistance, and I didn't want to really go any further. So I went in and I talked to Ian on Discord. Ian is one of the guys that basically spends every waking minute and even probably sleeping minutes dealing with people like me for the KO controller. I told him my problem, and he was saying, oh, just, try to wiggle it in and push it. And at this point, so I came down and I wiggled. I mean, there's not enough room to wiggle this thing. That's the first thing. It's super tight inside here, so I couldn't really wiggle it. So I pushed it until this yellow and this green wire got pushed out of the housing. And so apparently, I'm going to use the old controller as a reference. When I was looking in there, two of these pins got kind of just pushed straight back. They didn't get bent or anything like that. They just got pushed out. And I went and told Ian, I'm like, look, I pushed it and it pushed these out. And he was saying, try to do your best to wiggle those in or do whatever you can. This morning I woke up and I had the cable housing, and I just sat there and played with it. Here I would pull a pin out, and I tried to push them back in from the back using these needle nose and this cloth here, and just kind of squeezing them in, and it would go in a little bit, but I was careful, and I grabbed them with the needle nose and pulled them up, and I bent them, and then I'd push it in, and one of them would go in and the other one would come out, and then I'd do it all again, and then the other one would come out and the other one would go in. And it took me like 6 tries to get them both. At one point I grabbed an Allen key and I just kind of like pushed it up against here just to try to keep one of them from doing it, and the other one would come out. And after a little while and careful backing out, moving it, backing it back in, I got it to go. So if you're installing a KO controller and you're dealing with this, just remember, if this is too tight and those pins are, not perfectly lined up, it's going to be a challenge, because they did look pretty similar to this. There was nothing crazy. The only thing, I'm going to use this little Allen key as the example. So these are the two, yellow and green, these two right here. The only thing I noticed on mine was these were actually just a little bit down like this. So if I push these down a little bit toward the center, that's what mine looked like on that white one. And so I kind of kept pushing them up and putting it in, and finally ended up getting it. So we're at the stage now where I can actually finish up this controller. But I thought I'd give you guys that heads up if you're doing this and you run into the same issue. I don't want you to struggle maybe like I did. Lock, undo all these. Guys, we got our phase wires off, our black and red. We're back. Took a little breakfast making break, and it looks like the 8-year-old finally finished the lawn. So we're good. Here's my setup for now. I'm going to do, most of programming here for the KO. Here's the stock Surron. So just so you guys know, I'm going to be making content with the upgrades on the Surron on this one, beefing this one up, and then I'm going to be doing direct comparisons to the stock Surron. So if you like to see that and want to see side-by-side stuff, hit that like button, hit the subscribe, hit the bell notification so that I'm posting. So we're gonna get some good content on this, and we'll get back to getting this controller in there. There's a lot of attention to detail on this KO controller. It looks like they really thought about all the positioning of these. think what we need to do, get this stuff back up under here. We had to stuff up some of those cables up underneath here. Then we tucked back the compartment and put these screws back in. I've put the battery back in. I'm about to flip the breaker and I should hear a beep. Now, however, I did do an original programming, like I said, and it beeped a bunch, so I don't know what's going to happen. Breaker's on, battery's 84%. I'm gonna lift up the back tire. Sorry about this, but I finished this up off camera. Ran into some snags with the cables, and then it's so hot here today. I just wanted to get it over with and not have to sit and film this whole thing, but I'm going to go over with you real quick all the different bolts and things that I had to do to get this thing going. And it got to even a point with this nest of cables and this one pin that I showed you that was coming out. I had to take everything back off. I had it mounted, I didn't put my bash plate back on or any of these protectors, but I had it all mounted up. I couldn't get it to go, and it was just beeping. And the beeping was mostly the throttle calibration. I figured that out pretty early on. I knew the KO controller was good. I knew that my wiring harness was set up correctly. The one that had the pins were jacked. That was fine. Slowly just pushed the cables back up underneath the ignition. It's very tricky. There's not a lot of room up there. Just wanted it to work like it was supposed to out of the box, and honestly it did. Like, the only problem I had was 2 pins that got pushed out of on that wiring harness. I pushed those back up. I squoze this tray back down until I felt like it was not requiring me to really push on it. I pushed it in. You have to kind of squeeze it in a little bit, and then I got these bolts in and lines this up so that you can get the battery back in. Now at this point, the controller was still just hanging down, but I had this bolted in. So I slid the battery back in the bike. I hooked it all up and turned the breaker on and lifted it up and made sure that it would still go, so that it wasn't anything I did here pushing this back in with those wiring harness cables up in here causing any problems. So it was good and it worked. So I knew at that point I could mount the controller, get my bash guard on, and that's where we're at now. So the controller down here at the bottom, we have underneath the hall sensor the throttle voltage value. Voltage of the throttle just sitting there at idle. When you turn the bike on, we get a beep. Now I'm just gonna hold on to it real quick just so that make sure that it doesn't go with the throttle kickstand down. You can see me turning the throttle. I'm gonna turn the throttle and you're gonna watch this voltage. I don't know, I hope you can see it, but it actually goes up, and he basically says, what's that max say? And then we come up here to the throttle threshold high, and we set that just above what this is, and then we set the low a little bit above what that says as well. So just so that the throttle cuts off a little bit before what this base throttle voltage is showing. So those are the only settings I've even changed so far on the hex file. All right, so these are no settings. 90 amp discharge rate, so that's basically stock. So we should just get stock power basically, and I didn't really change any of the throttle mappings, so I'm a little cautious here.
All right, guys, so at the end of this, I'm just going to do a little voiceover talking about some of the issues I ran into at the end. The power on that controller is definitely more. What I'm not going to show you here is, a few of those tests. I ran into some issues, and there is a throttle delay. When you let go of the throttle, it sometimes takes 100 to 200 milliseconds for it to come off, which is pretty big problem if you're doing wheelies and stuff like that. It's not that noticeable if you're just cruising around. So with that in mind, I did some other tests, and the bike, even with the stock battery, was overall faster. I set my GPS up and I was able to reach 50 miles an hour. So I'm going to do some more head-to-head testing while they're still working on that throttle delay. Those guys are hard at work at it. They're releasing updates on it consistently. So I'll keep you guys updated. Look for some more head-to-head tests in the meantime.